So I've learned about myself that, there's sometimes shows you just throw on in the background, right? And you're listening to them, but you're not 100% paying attention, right? One of my favorite shows to do that with is a show called Shark Tank. Who's seen Shark Tank? All right. It seems really intimidating, right? If you've never seen it before, I'm going to explain it to you. This is where inventors or somebody who has a really good idea, they come before some of America's most successful people. Mark Cuban is one of them, the owner of the Mavericks. His net worth is like $4 billion, right? These are people who have money to spend. They're just doing this, just investing in other companies to increase their net worth, and they are able to do that. And so what will happen is an inventor will come, somebody with a good idea, they come and they present their idea in front of this panel of very successful people, and they'll say, my idea is, a robot that preaches sermons so that the conference doesn't have to hire any more pastors, right? So I want $300,000 for 15% of my company. And what will happen, and they'll go back and forth, and they try to lower the numbers, or maybe they think it's a really good idea, and eventually, hopefully, they come to a conclusion, and then they will invest that $300,000 into your company. Now, the expectation, right, when maybe you've done this, and you had your own business, and you've tried to grow it, and then you needed investors. Well, somebody invests into your company. Maybe it was your parents. Maybe it was a friend. The expectation is usually then that you use that money to grow your business, right? It's not just, thank you for the $300,000, I'm going on vacation. That's not what you do with it. The expectation is that you grow what you have started or what they have paid into. And a lot of times on this show, they care about the numbers, don't get me wrong. But one thing, and I've watched little interviews with these people after, they say a lot of times the idea could be great. But what I'm looking for is the person. I'm investing in them. If I feel that they have the drive, if I feel like they are passionate about what they're doing, I'm willing to give the money because of them. And so the question is, this morning, do we have the ability to grow? If you haven't been with us the last few weeks, we've been in the middle of a series called The Kingdom of Heaven is Like. We're going through all the parables of Jesus, not all of them, but 5 of them in Matthew. And today's no different. We're going to continue. Last week we were in Matthew 25. We're going to continue in Matthew 25 this morning. When you get there, we're going to be in verse 14. Usually I read out of the English Standard Version, but today I'm reading out of the New King James, so if it sounds a little bit different, now you know. Chapter 25 of Matthew, verse 14 says this: "For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country who called his servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability, and immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5 talents. And likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents, came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also who had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord.'" Verse 24, "Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, 'Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there, you have what is yours.' But his Lord answered and said to him, 'You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers. And at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Jesus speaks in parables often. It was prophesied that he would. The thing about parables is people would recognize, what he was talking about. This was a common thing. There were these masters, very rich men who had a lot of land and cattle and, whatever it was that they sold and made their wealth with. They went on trips. That's still the same today, right? Some of the wealthiest people in the world, they have private jets because they have, meetings and business deals in other countries and things like that. Or, they go on a lot of vacation because they can afford it, right? Whatever it is, that practice was practiced back then. And so the master would go on trips. But the thing is, nowadays, with scheduling and GPS and things like that, I could tell you all, "Hey guys, I'm going on vacation. I'm going to be gone 7 days exactly. I'll be back next week. You'll see me then." Without modern technology, without things like cars and GPS, no matter how hard you plan, no matter how much detail you put into your trip, you really couldn't tell exactly when you'd be back. You might experience some kind of setback or whatever, but the point is, you didn't know how long you were going to be gone, so you'd ask people to, hey, I'm going to be gone, and so I'm going to ask that you kind of run the place for a while so that we don't, lose any revenue or what have you. And when I come back, then I can take over again, but I need you to watch over. And so that's what happens. This master, he calls 3 people and says, "I'm heading out, but you 3 I really trust, and so I'm going to give you some money. I'm going to give this to you so that when I come back, the company didn't go belly up, and I just hope that, we increase in our territory, so to speak." And so 5 talents, 2 talents, 1 talent, again, these are kind of hard numbers to really pinpoint, but this was the equivalent of thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Even the one who received 1 talent, that's the equivalent of if I remember correctly, it's 50 days of labor, right? It's a lot of money that this man received. And so, the one who receives 5, what he does, he immediately goes and he starts investing it, and he puts his money into something, and he grows that money. It says in some of the things I was researching, some of the commentaries, that to double your money back then was really easy, actually. If you just put some effort towards it, people would buy in and you'd have all that you needed. It wasn't that hard to double your money. I wish it was that way today, right? And so the one who has 5, he does that. And when we see later, he comes back, "Now I have 10. The one who was given 2, he does the same. When the master comes back, he has 4. But the one who received only 1 talent had a really poor investment strategy, we might say. So like I said, if this is your first time here, we've been going through this series, The Kingdom of Heaven is Like. We've realized that heaven is a few things, right? This kingdom of heaven is a few things. Number 1, we have seen that the kingdom of heaven has value. And And not only that the kingdom of heaven has value, that the kingdom of heaven values your presence there, in so much that Jesus gave his life and died so that you could be there. We've seen that the kingdom of heaven is a place where forgiveness flows freely, and that people who are citizens of the kingdom of heaven live life forgiven, and they are freely forgiving others who are there as well. Last week, we spoke about the need for being prepared. The kingdom of heaven wants you to be prepared because it could come at any time. And so now we've read this story. What is next? I would say that the kingdom of heaven is asking you today to invest what you have been given, all of these things we just talked about. Invest what you have been given and invest it back into the kingdom. Let me break this down for a bit. When we have our logo up, right, you'll see some words under our logo. The words are love, serve, grow, and go. That makes up our mission statement here at this church. Summed up, that's what we're here to do. And so we recognize that we have been loved into the kingdom in that we were valued. The kingdom of heaven has loved us into the kingdom, so we should love others. We realize that we are serving others when we forgive them because we make a way for them to recognize that this is what life is like when I've been forgiven and I can make a change. So we serve others. And in the last chapter and in this chapter, they're combined. They're in the same sentence. And it's believed that this was told as just one long story. That this is where we grow and we go. We prepare ourselves. We grow in knowing that the kingdom of heaven can come at any time. And then we go by investing what we've been given back into the kingdom of heaven. And as I've been looking at this verse and I've been studying and going through this passage, there's one area that just sticks out to me every time I read it. And it hasn't always been like that, but for some reason now, as I read it, it just sticks out to me like there's a bright light shining in my face. Verse 24 in chapter 25. Verse 24 says this, and this is speaking of the one who had 1 talent. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And then verse 25, and I was afraid and went and hid your talents in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. He was afraid. When I was in high school, I got my first real job. My first real job that, it wasn't a school job. They were paying me, real money at the time, right? And it didn't go to my tuition. It came to me. I worked at the time, Florida Hospital Laundry, now Advent Health Laundry. On the campus of Forest Lake Academy, there's a huge laundry plant, and you get all kinds of disturbing things back that you need to clean. How it worked, everybody got sick. Let's just put that out there. Everyone got sick the first week. And then after that, I guess you built immunity to it. But there was a man, our supervisor, who worked there, and he was, as this passage describes, just a hard, angry man. He was, and I'm pretty short, he was shorter than me, but just was mad. Wakes up in the morning, mad. Goes to sleep, even more mad. It was just this cycle, and we would meet in the mornings, and, so we'd all huddle around, and there were some of us who got special assignments that day, right? So he'd say, for example, today, Ben, I want you to be the one who loads all of the carts for our urgent care facilities, and that was a detailed job because they're not as big as a hospital, so they needed a specific number of blankets and a specific number of X, Y, Z. And every morning we used to get together, and what we were thinking the entire time is, I don't want to be the guy that gets the special job, because that means he's going to be watching me, right? And so, luckily this morning that I'm thinking, I wasn't chosen, but my friend was, and so he's like, all right, and Mike, you're going to be on urgent care duty today. And you could see Mike's entire day was ruined in one sentence. And so what happened is Mike did not perform well under pressure, okay? And so what happened is Mike, he had his job to do. He's loading the carts, but you could see, right? And those of you who are listening on the podcast, you can't see, but what you'd see was the supervisor just in the corner with his arms folded, watching, not saying anything, just watching, making sure that you're doing what you need to do. And what would happen is Mike would freeze up. He couldn't do what he needed to do because he knew that someone was watching. He was afraid of this man. You can't serve someone that you're scared of. Fear, they say fear is a great motivator. It might get somebody to do a task, but it's not a great motivator long term. You're not serving that person. You are a slave in the bad sense to that person if you are fearful of them. You cannot serve someone that you are scared of. And so we read this verse 25. The man says, I was afraid. So what did he do? He hides the talent instead of investing it and doing something with it. Why? He was afraid, probably, that he'd mess up and that the repercussion would be harsh. So he said, let me not mess up at all. I'll just give it right back to him. And so this is a question, right? In these stories that we've been reading, in these parables, God, the kingdom of heaven, is like, right? So it says the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country. So let's get one thing straight. The kingdom of heaven isn't the servants. God is represented in this story as the master, as he should be. We are, all of us sitting here today, we make up the three servants, two who invested and did well, and then the one who hid it away and didn't want to mess anything up. So when this guy says, I was afraid and went and hid your talents in the ground, we're posed with a question. And that question is, what is it that we think about God? How do we see God? Right? Do you see him as that person who's always sitting in the corner and watching you and waiting for you to mess up? Are you scared of God? Are you here because of fear? Are you scared of God? You see, there's a battle, right, between grace and works. Grace and works, right? So you might be thinking, okay, if this whole story is about, well, I need to invest and I need to do for the kingdom of heaven, well, then that's works. And the Bible says that that's not what we're supposed to do. Well, then on the flip side, if we just say, well, no, God's supposed to do everything, and we just sit back and we don't have to do a thing, we can hide our talent and just wait for him to come back, and we're going to be okay. There's a battle between grace and works. I'm going to let you know right now, your works, right, are, the Bible says, filthy rags. They're not good. They're not good at all. Works will never get you into the kingdom of heaven. Only grace does that. But grace does not mean that we sit around and do nothing, right? Grace means we fail him daily. We're all failing him right now. I'm here failing my master. You're here failing your master. But grace fills in those gaps. Grace means that when we fail, he's not standing in the corner waiting to chastise us. Grace means that he is waiting to love you deeply. I think of, a relationship that maybe some of you, I hope not, but statistically you probably have had a poor relationship, some of you, with maybe your father, where you wanted to impress him. You wanted to work hard to make him happy. And yet, as much as you worked when you messed up, he was there. Maybe it was your mother. She was there to put you down and let you know you messed up. Grace means I spill the milk. It's not good that I spilled the milk. I spilled it on the carpet maybe. That's not great. But grace means that our Father comes and puts an arm around you and says, it's all right. Let's clean this up and let's see how we can't do this again. Your works are filthy rags, but grace is what's filling the gaps. We see another thing about this servant, right? So this servant was only given 1 talent, while his friends, his colleagues, were given more. And the Bible even says here that they were given each to their own ability. And so right away, maybe this guy is thinking, well, that's offensive. You have offended me. He's worth 10, but I'm worth 1. Some people have bigger responsibilities, quote unquote, so to speak. Some people are given more because of their ability. Some people have bigger things to do here in church. But it doesn't mean that you are any less. Not at all. Sometimes this falls on a lot of pastors, right? And you might feel, man, the conference sent me super far away to some small church to die. They don't care about me. They don't think that I can do it. Maybe in your job, you see all your colleagues are getting promoted, but you've stayed here in the same place, and you're saying, they left me here to die. They don't trust me. Maybe you have people here at church, and you see, man, it just looks like their families are going, they're taking vacations, they're making more money than me. I'm here to be broke and just, my family's going to suffer. Or maybe their kids, it's like, man, they're raising their kids awesome. What am I doing wrong? How come my kids don't do this? And how come, my husband doesn't do that? And my wife doesn't this and that? But what you're given is the most important thing that you're doing at that moment. 1 servant was given 10. That's the most important thing that was given to him through his ability, that he should be working on that. This other guy was given 1. It's of equal importance. Why? If you have an international ministry, right? Like maybe, if I try to compare myself to somebody like Dwight Nelson or, Breath of Life Ministries, that's what God has called them to do. That's what's most important. That's what God is asking them to do. Maybe you are called to be a CEO, and that's the most important thing that God has called you to do. Maybe you just have a cubicle, and that is what God has called you to do. You are on equal playing field. If you're a doctor, that's what God has called you to do. If you're a nurse, that's what God has called you to do. If your family is large, that's the most important thing God has called you to do. If your family is small, God has called you to minister to that family. Whether it's a lot or a little bit, spoiler alert, it's all His. Right? We go back to this. It says the master gave 1 servant 5 talents. It's not the servant's money. To the other servant, he gave 2, and the other one he gave 1. None of the money was theirs. It's all his. It's all his. So for somebody to think, oh, well, I'm better because I have 5. Oh, I'm better than you because I have 2, and you only have 1. You have nothing. Really, you have nothing. The servants have nothing in this story. It all belongs to the master. It was a gift. And in response, the one servant does nothing. He hides it away for fear of the repercussions. If we think back to the story we just read last week, we see 2 sides of the same irresponsible coin, right? The 10 virgins, 5 of them were wise, 5 were foolish. The problem with the 5 foolish virgins was that they assumed that it would be easy. He's going to be here on time. I don't need to bring anything extra. It's going to be okay. On the other side, now we have this story where the servant thought it would be too hard. 2 sides of the same irresponsible coin. This quote here from the Expositor's Bible Commentary says this: grace, which these servants were given, grace never condones irresponsibility. Even those given less are obligated to use and develop what they have. It's a partnership. Think of it like this. It's a partnership where he's holding all the cards, but he lets you work alongside him. The power is all his. What he's asking us to do is to share it. He's asking us to share it with others. Isaiah 55, verse 11, it promises us this, that his word does not return to him void. It accomplishes what he desires and achieves the purpose for which it was sent. I tell you what, if you're scared of getting out there and making a dent in the kingdom, or for the kingdom of heaven, if you're too scared, this promise, his word does not return to him void. If you invest your time, your relationships, it will not return to him void. It can't. You can't mess this up. That's the plus side. We can't mess this one up. The only way we mess it up is by doing nothing. And I mean, how often is that? Like I said, my friend Mikey, who was working and doing his thing at the hospital laundry, what he would start doing is he would freeze up. He says, well, I can't mess up if I don't do anything. And then what would happen? He's watching him do nothing. Hey, what are you doing? You're messing up. You're not doing anything. He's still in trouble. The only way we can mess this up with God on our side is by doing nothing. God has invested in us. He paid a price for you and for me. He paid the price. He has invested value. He values you. He is investing his forgiveness, because remember, forgiveness always costs someone something. And in return, what he asks for us in Matthew 25, he asks that we be prepared at all times. He also asks that we partner with him for kingdom growth. Here at our church, we love, we serve, we grow, and we go. This passage concludes, the master, he concludes when he talks to the first 2 servants, "You've done well, my good and faithful servant. You were given a little bit, you're going to be given more, but not just that. Join in your master's joy. His joy is our joy is his joy. When we make a dent for the kingdom of heaven, all of heaven rejoices. That brings us joy. Because we're serving, we're growing, we're going, we're loving. Soon, we will see the ultimate manifestation of this investment. God has made a huge investment on behalf of humanity. And he's going to see that investment all the way through to the end. Next week, I've been looking forward to next week's sermon. Next week, we're going to talk about it. I'm excited for it. But what I'd like to say today, in conclusion, this parable of the talents tells us that in all things, stewardship, right? We've been given a little bit. We should invest that. We should go into the kingdom of heaven, or we should go into this world and make a dent for the kingdom of heaven. In all things, we can't fail. His word doesn't return to him void. Today, if you've not done it before, I encourage you to say, Jesus, I'm giving it all to you today. It's not going to return to him void. You can't lose. In all things, God, you can have it all. My one little talent that I have it, take it, increase my territory. Maybe you have 10 talents. Maybe you're a 10-talent person. Give it all to God today. If you haven't done so, I encourage you to take Jesus, allow him into your heart today, and see what he does.